Hello and welcome. My name is Sean Lacey of Lacey Maths and Stats Consultancy, and this video is a demonstration on using custom tables in SPSS. In this video, I'm going to use custom tables to describe the difference between quantitative measurements and then to describe the association between qualitative measurements. The data used in this video would be based on the sample questionnaire that I would have introduced in a previous YouTube video, of where 4 measurements were gathered: participants' gender, participants' rating of the quality of Wi-Fi at their home, age categories, and how many hours a day participants would spend on the Wi-Fi at home. Up on YouTube already, there's in one of the playlists that I have there on the YouTube channel, there's the playlist SPSS Syntax to Support Transparency in Data Manipulation. In this video, or the set of videos, you'll find the various, data manipulation techniques introduced and applied using SPSS syntax. I'm going to basically continue on where the last video would have finished off in that case, and that is basically where we would have had this syntax here. I'm just going to run the syntax, and this will just give a data set, a data set of sample data that we can just apply for this video. So here we have it. Okay, so when we run off the script, so again that script would have, or that syntax would have been from a previous YouTube video. When we run off that syntax, we'll end up with these 5 measurements. So the first measurement is this case number measurement. Then we have the 4 measurements after that. So this is subject's gender, the rating of Wi-Fi, age category, and then how on average how many hours in a given day a participant would spend on the Wi-Fi. Okay, so this is the data that we have. What I want us to look at in the first case here is, so if I go back here to the handout, is I want to look at the difference between quantitative measurements. So what I'm going to take here in this case is look at trying to describe the difference in the hours, the average hours on a given day that participants use their Wi-Fi with respect to their gender. Is there a difference? I want to look at describing that. Now, traditionally, when I'd run a statistical training course, I would just look at using the explore function option, I suppose, in SPSS to do this. The one thing when you do the explore, and this is what I'm going to start off here when I'm going to look at, I suppose, generating statistics in SPSS here, is when I run off explore, you'd find that you end up with an excessive amount of information, that you wouldn't necessarily need all the statistics that the explorer would give back. So what I'd often find in the training courses, that I'd end up just deleting various rows and columns of data. And look, I would personally feel that that's a good enough starting point. But I would always then say to, I suppose, the students that if you felt that you're going to be running off Explorer on a regular basis and kind of formatting the table in the same way, then maybe you should be just looking at doing a custom table. But often in the training course, you wouldn't necessarily have the time to be doing the custom tables or outlining the steps to doing a custom table. And I suppose ultimately that's the motivation for actually doing this video. Okay, so what I'm going to first do is just, I suppose, repeat kind of the steps that I would do traditionally in a training course of if I was trying to determine whether or not there's a difference in a quantitative measurement, which is going to say question 4, with respect to a categorical measurement, how would I generate those statistics? So I'd go up to Analyze, Descriptive Statistics, Explore. Case number will go into label cases by. Gender will be the factor that I'm going to use in this example here, and how many hours, so this is the quantitative measure, I'm going to put that into the dependent list. I'm not interested in the plots here, so I'm just interested in the statistics, so I'm going to press that. And then I suppose, just to be consistent with the previous videos, I'm going to just look at the syntax for it as well, to be storing the syntax. And what I'm just going to do here is I'm going to just put in the comment here that this is the original. Okay, as in kind of the original method, I suppose, that I would use. Okay, now you can just see here that there's a load of syntax up above it. That syntax is from the previous videos that were up on YouTube. So if you click on those videos, you'll see that there's a link to Google Drive, and you'll be able to download the syntax that's actually up there. Okay, but anyway, for this here, I'm just going to highlight this bit syntax here. I'm going to press Ctrl-R, and it's going to generate the descriptive statistics. So what we have here is we're looking at the average, I suppose, or we're looking at the difference in the time participants spend on the Wi-Fi in a given day with respect to their gender. And here there's males, females, and rather not say. So often in the training course, I would just look at kind of, I suppose, just formatting this table a small bit. I'd pivot it, I'd bring the gender up. Now there's loads of ways to format a table, and I suppose this is just one way that I find that I'd often use. So I'd get rid of the statistics that I would feel that I don't need. So I don't need the trim statistics, as in the trimmed mean. I say I don't need the variance because the variance is ultimately the standard deviation squared. I like the minimum value, I like the maximum value. I don't necessarily feel I need the range. If I had the minimum and the maximum value, I don't necessarily need the range. Interquartile range is a nice statistic. I actually prefer presenting the percentiles, the 25th and the 75th percentile. I feel it just gives that additional bit of information. Like the range here, or interquartile range, just tells us that 50% of the data lie within 9 units. The units in this case would be hours, 9 hours of each other. That's what that will be telling us for the females. But I feel you can get a small bit more information when you look at the percentiles, and we'll see this with the custom tables. I get rid of the skewness and kurtosis. They're very good statistics and obviously have their purpose, but I suppose when it comes to describing a measurement, I'd often find that I wouldn't necessarily use that when I'm kind of, I suppose, presenting my summary statistics. And this is a table that, you know, when I'd format it, this is what I'd often end up with, okay? So I'm just going to close that down. And I think as a starting point, I think that's kind of a good way to kind of, I suppose, focus the mind to how best one might want to describe the measurements within their own research. Now, there's loads of ways of doing this, and this is just kind of, I suppose, a starting point to it. And that's often how I'd say the training courses would be that I'd facilitate. They'd be guidelines, okay? And I suppose guidelines to kind of promote good practice in statistical analysis. Now, I would then say that if you felt that you were repeating these steps over and over, this kind of deleting rows and columns, that there has to be a better way of doing it. And I would ultimately feel that the better way of doing it is maybe looking at doing the custom tables, okay? So you'd come up here to analyze, drop down menu tables, go across the custom tables. Again, loads of options to doing this, but what I'm going to just try to do here is I'm just going to try to replicate this table that we have here, okay? So this one here, just going to replicate that. So what do we have? So we have how many hours. That will go in as the rows. That's what I'm thinking of here. The gender will go in as the column. Okay, so that's looking fine there. If we click on the, I suppose, the quantitative measurement, which is how many rows, if I click on that here, you can see that the summary statistics comes available down here. So I'm going to click this, and this is then where you can kind of select the statistics that you're interested in. So I'm just going to, I suppose, as a guideline, I'm going to just use these statistics. The one additional one that I'm going to add that I often like using is the sample size. So I'm actually going to just put in the count as well. I'm going to put across the count here. I like presenting the count. I think it's good to say, look, how many you have in each group. I'm going to just actually put that up at the top, okay? So the count is essentially your sample size. Then what's next? So if we look over here, we have the confidence interval of the mean. Like, there's loads of options here to be kind of playing around with. So I'm going to just try to be as specific as possible. So here, you can see here, confidence interval, lower and upper. You can see here, look, that there's one actually for the median as well, which can be quite good if you're looking at a lot of skewed data. You might prefer to use the median as opposed to the mean. I'm just going to throw that across. The next here, if I'm looking over it from the Explorer, it was the median. I'm going to put that across. Then if I come further down underneath sub, you can see here that we have a standard deviation. I'm going to click that across. Then the min and max is what we've next. So minimum first and then maximum. I think that just makes more sense, even though the order here in SPSS is max and then min. And then the last thing that we have here in the Explorer is the interquartile range. Now, the custom tables doesn't give the interquartile range. What it does give, though, is the percentile, the 25th and the 75th percentile. I personally nearly prefer that information. I feel what you're able to tell somebody then when you're actually looking at that information, sorry, as I'm talking there, I'm not thinking what I'm clicking. So you're able to tell, I suppose, a user or the reader, you're giving them the cut points. So 25% of my data lies below this point, 75% of my data lies below this point, hence 50% of my data lies in between. So you're kind of giving a user a lot more information than just the interquartile range, but you're also giving them the interquartile range. The other thing that I like doing with the custom tables is the decimal places. I'd be quite particular with decimal places. I feel that, like for me as a guideline, it would be that my measures of centrality should be one extra decimal place to whatever my raw data is. So the raw data in this case are integers. So I would feel my measures of centrality should be to one decimal place. Then the measures of variation would be an extra decimal place again. So in this example, that would be 2 decimal places. That's how I'd use it. Sometimes, I suppose, clients or even, I suppose, journals could have their own way of doing it, and that's fair enough as well. Okay, so I think as a starting point, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to look at the mean to being 1 decimal place. So here underneath the format, if I scroll up to the very first option, this is the one for the decimal places. I'm going to put that as 1 decimal place. So you can see that the sample size is defaulted to 0 decimal places, which makes sense. When it comes to the confidence interval, people have different opinions on this. Sometimes people like the confidence interval to be the same decimal place as the mean. Sometimes people like the confidence interval to be 1 extra decimal place to whatever the mean is. Okay, so look, I don't really mind. I suppose this is just more an illustration of how to actually do it. Okay, so what I'm just quickly going to do here is I'm just going to set up the format. It's just that bit faster if I just put in all the format that I want and then do the decimal places after that. Okay. So that's the format. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to just do the decimal place as 1 for the confidence interval. Median will be a measure of centrality, to do that as 1. Standard deviation is 2 decimal places. And now the reason I'm using this is because the raw data is 0 decimal places. The minimum, maximum, I leave it as the raw data, and then the percentiles, I generally do that 1 extra decimal place. That's what I look at as a starting point, okay? Then I'll press apply selection. So when I press apply selection, you'd nearly expect, like for my version of SPSS, now I have seen other versions where this would actually close once you press apply selection. For me it doesn't, so I'm just going to press close, and this is the table that I have over here then, okay? Now you can see here that it's in quite a wide format. I wouldn't like that. I'd like it now to be quite similar to what we have in the Explorer. Underneath the summary statistics, you can see here the position is down as columns, so I'm going to change that to rows. And that tidies it up nicely. Okay, there's loads of other options that you can be selecting. I'll let you play around with those themselves on your own time. I'm going to actually, when I finish running this, I'm going to come back in just to show you what these other tabs up here have, and just 1 or 2 other options, but I won't go into the massive detail. I feel just for the purposes of this video, it's just to kind of get you started in the direction of using the custom tables, and I suppose to see the use and the benefit of it. Okay, so I'm going to press paste here. I won't do paste all the time, but I just think it's good to do the paste just so you can actually see that. So here you have the custom tables. You can see that there's a lot of text, syntax behind the scenes here for what we've done. And when we've done that, this is what we end up with. Okay, so I would personally feel that that's quite nice. What I'd probably look at changing is I don't like the word count. For me, I'd prefer to say sample size. Some people actually just prefer to say n. So look, that can actually vary. Okay, so people have their own way of formatting this. But look, I would think it's ultimately the numbers, that the numbers are accurate, and then you can just maybe format the text yourself, whether you do it in SPSS or in Word, that's up to you. Okay, so I think that's quite good. I would feel that where this is really useful if you find that in the Explorer that you're continuously deleting rows and columns, that I would then feel at that point, look, the custom tables is a kind of something to maybe look into. Okay, now before, I suppose, moving on to the second one, which is looking at describing the association between qualitative measurements, I'm going to just quickly go through the different options that you have when you run off of custom tables. Now, one thing that I like with this is, just say for the gender, here for the gender we've the 3 levels, female, male, and rather not say. Now just say for whatever your own research, you might want to ignore one of the levels when it comes to the table. You might, we'll say the rather not say group, you might prefer to put them to one side, or even the male group, you might prefer to put them to one side, just for whatever, I suppose, discussion that you're having within your own research. The custom tables gives you that as an option. Now obviously you could use select cases in SPSS as well, that is an option, but the custom tables gives this here. So I'm just going to show you that if we click on the gender measurement here as the column heading, you can see down here in the bottom left the categories and totals came active. So I'm going to click on that, and this is then where you can decide which ones you might want to remove, if you want to remove any. So here, just for this, I'm just going to remove the male. I'm going to take out the male and say, look, for whatever descriptive statistics we're going to do, we're going to focus on the females against the rather not say. There's other buttons over here showing totals and stuff like that. I'll come back to that later on, actually, when we're looking at the association between measurements, okay? But at this moment, I'm just going to leave that there. I'm happy enough with that. You can see then we've lost that column, the male column. Over here then we have titles. I don't use the titles personally myself. I would generally feel that I'm going to bring my table into either my LaTeX file, or I'm going to bring it into my Word file, and in which case I'm going to use my own caption. But here you can give it a title if you want. The title will be the top above the table in the center. The caption is to the top left of the table if you put in a caption, and then the corner would be some text that you'd have in the bottom right. Okay, so there are just different options if you wanted to kind of play around with. I generally don't, but I mean some people have their own ways of doing things as well. Okay, so that's one thing. The other thing then here is the test statistics. When the test statistics, so this, like, if you think of what we're looking at here, we're looking at comparing, I suppose, ultimately here we're looking at comparing females against rather not say group. So when we're comparing them, we might want to do an independent t-test. In this case, if we left it in the male category there, we might be looking to do an ANOVA and then the post hoc test. We can kind of do the comparing the means here as an option. No, I don't do this. I much prefer actually to do the formal test myself, but it is here as an option if you want to compare the means. And what I like with this is when you're comparing the means, it will adjust from multiple comparisons if that's what you're interested in, and it would use the Bonferroni and the Benjamini-Hochberg tests. Okay, the Bonferroni being more strict than the other one. Okay, so there are options, but I suppose for this video I'm more interested in just looking at producing descriptive statistics to describe, I suppose, ultimately statistics to describe measurements, as opposed to doing any statistical inference. And if for me personally, if it was coming to do the statistical inference, I would actually just go off and do my traditional t-test or my ANOVA or chi-square test later on. Okay, then you have the options here, which is another tab. I generally don't do much with this. This is just kind of telling you how you might want to handle missing data, and there's different bits and pieces with this. Okay, but I think for what we want in this video, we're actually kind of okay. So I'm just going to press OK. I'm not going to paste this time. I'm just going to press OK, just so we can actually just see, look, what the outcome for that will be. Okay, so it's quite nice. I do feel, if you feel like for me, if you feel that you're continuously editing the tables in SPSS, then maybe you should look at doing custom tables. That would be kind of my guideline to kind of deciding, look, should I go down this route or not. Okay, there's obviously a small bit of learning, but I think if you're doing it on a regular basis, it's well worth it. Okay, the other thing that I'm going to just look at would be looking at describing the association between qualitative measurements. Now for me, when I'm looking at describing the association between qualitative measurements, I'm going to just focus on two measurements here for this video. I would generally just do a crosstab. I feel the crosstab is quite good, and obviously I can have row percentage, column percentages in the crosstab. There's the chi-square test, McNamara test, all different types of tests depending on how many levels there are and so on like that to the categories. So, but it is there for the custom tables as well if you're interested in. So even though it's not something that I would use on a regular basis in the custom tables, I felt it would be a more complete video if I just showed that aspect of it. Okay, so what I'm going to just do first is I'm going to just first show what I would traditionally do myself, which is kind of similar to what I did with the comparing the quantitative measurements. I first did the explore option and then I did the custom tables. So here what I'm going to look at is do the crosstabs first and then do the custom tables, so we can just see how they're all aligning up. Okay, so we're going to go to Analyze Descriptive Statistics, Crosstabs. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to say put gender in as the row, but how would you rate the quality of your Wi-Fi? That's fair enough. I'm going to put that into column. So here what I have is two categorical measurements. One is nominal, one is ordinal. In statistics, obviously you have your various tests. I'm going to just stay away from them. They're obviously there. They're quite good. Here the cells, I do like, I suppose for the cells what I find can be useful if I'm trying to maybe describe or compare the measurements in kind of some way through I suppose the percentage, I suppose the counts. What can often be useful will be the percentages as well. I personally like row percentages. I think it's nearly easier to compare measurements looking at them going across, but some people like column and other people like the total. Look, they all have their benefits. I'm just going to go for row percentages. I'm going to press continue. I'm going to press paste. I'm going to just I suppose just to show the syntax that we have here, I'm going to put in original. So as when I say original, it's kind of just like it's what I would generally do myself. Okay, generate that, and this is what we end up with. Okay, so this is a nice crosstab. This is looking at, I suppose, the split in the sample. So there's 90 in this study between across I suppose the split, which are not necessarily split, but more the association between gender and how people rate the quality of their Wi-Fi at home. The main thing I probably would do with this is I generally don't like the titles. I would feel from my own reporting that I would always put in a caption in my report, so I don't necessarily feel I need a title to the table, but everyone has their own way of doing these things. Okay, so look, that's quite nice. I'm just going to go off now and try to do it using custom tables here. So custom tables, I'm going to reset this. So this is the last one that we just did. I'm going to reset that. That's perfect. I'm going to try to do it the same way that we have it here. So gender was down as the row, so I'm going to put in gender as the row. How you'd rate the quality of your Wi-Fi then would be the column. That all works out quite nice. Okay, so that's where we are as a start. Okay, you can see here then that there's just different options to kind of formatting this. It says count there. You mightn't like that. You can just put it down here as like that. Or you could even, as an option here, if you wanted to, you could even select hide, and it just hides that wording of count as well. Okay, I'm actually going to just leave it like that. I think that's actually quite nice. You can see here that the one thing that, and definitely this would have confused me at the start when I was using the custom tables, it doesn't give the totals. You see here the way we have the total for the rows and the totals for the columns. It doesn't give that. You can kind of see this here in just the framework that we're missing the totals. If we wanted the totals, we have to click on the measurement. So here for gender, if I click on that, and then under categories and totals. Okay, so if you click this, you can say total. Now it's going to put in the total, press apply, and there you have the total. And then it's up here, it will be the same up here. If I click this, sorry, I click on the column name, come down here to the bottom left, click the totals, then here, press apply, then it puts in the totals if you want them. Now it's kind of nice that it gives you a table without them. It obviously has its uses as well. I'm just going to put in the table. Okay, what's next then is, I suppose, when I think of the crosstab that I did back here, I did row percentages. So if I'm just trying to replicate that a small bit, okay, first Okay, so I'm going to click on the gender. With gender, I'm going to go into the summary statistics. You can see that that wasn't active there first. Okay, so now it is active. So I'm going to click the summary statistics. What summary statistics do I want? Well, if I do row percent, you can see here, if I expand that, it will now give the row percentage. Okay, so I think that's quite nice. One thing that's really nice with this, with the custom tables, and it can be quite useful, is it actually gives you confidence interval around the row percentages as well. That can be a nice add-on at times. Okay, so you're not necessarily just displaying the row percentage, you're displaying the row percentage plus or minus the margin of error, which can be a nice addition to a narrative that you might be having. Okay, so I'm going to put that in. Obviously this makes the table quite big, but just to kind of show you that option. Okay, I'm just going to put that in. I'm going to press apply to selection. You can just see back here it has updated it, but for my version of SPSS this window stays open, so I'm going to just close that. And this is the table that we actually have. Okay, so this is going to be quite similar to the previous table that I did with the crosstabs, except obviously it has those confidence intervals, which I think are quite nice. I'm going to just paste that because this is the first time you're just doing it, and it's more just to show how to paste. Now usually I don't paste until I have the table that I'm going to use in my own report. You know, sometimes you'd find that you might be generating the table a few times until you end up with the version that you're happy with. When you end up with the version that you're happy with, generally that's where I do the pasting then. Okay, so I've highlighted that. I'm just going to press Control Enter, and there we have it. You can see now this is quite long. That's because I did those confidence intervals. Now by putting in the confidence intervals, I'm actually lost. See the way the headings, it doesn't say the confidence intervals are there anymore. You see, I've lost that because I'm just going to shoot back into the custom tables here. That's because I told it to hide the headings. So I'm just going to put them back in. See, look, when I put them back in, it puts in those. Now I'll actually just run that off actually here, and you can just see. Okay, so that was, look, it all depends. Like if you only had the counts, maybe you don't need the headings, but if you're putting in other information, you probably would need the headings. Okay, so that's, I mean, just to kind of make it very clear cut to what you're actually outlining. You can see then here with the counts 12, 14, 127. If I just read off the first column, that's the same that we had up here. Look, 12, 14, 127. Okay, so it's the same count. I suppose it's nice because there is just that additional information that you can get from it. One other thing that can be nice with this, and it's the same that I would have done with when I'm comparing the quantitative measurements, is you can drop rows and columns if you're interested in. Say we could drop the females, we could drop the people that said excellent if we wanted to. Okay, that is an option to us, and I'm just going to quickly show that, and then I'll leave it at that then for this. Okay, so if I click on the gender, we could go into categories and totals, and just say I want to drop the females from this, whatever analysis I'm trying to do. That's that option done. Very good. I could then look at my heading as well, and then I could do my categories and tables, and then I'm going to just say, look, drop the excellent. Fair enough. Press apply, and there that does it. Now obviously we could use the set places to do it as well, but this is just that bit faster even doing that. Okay, and then there's obviously the titles. I've covered that. The test statistics. So here you look at compare column proportions if that's what you're interested in. You have a chi-square test, and when you're comparing the column proportions, it can control for multiple comparisons again if that's something that you're interested in. Okay, but again, I just think for this video the descriptive statistics is plenty. We'll press OK here. So what did I do for this one? I removed the females, I dropped the females, and I dropped the excellent group. Okay, if I press OK here to this, you can see that that's done nicely, and what's obviously very nice, but when you say it, it's kind of there, it seems quite obvious, but obviously the totals are all updated correctly as well. 6, 1 is 7 and everything like that. Okay, and remember these percentages are row percentages, so when you add them going across, they'll end up tallying then to 100%. That's what you have down here. Okay, so that's just I suppose nearly a crash course on using the custom tables. When I use the custom tables, it is predominantly for the difference between quantitative measurements. I felt just for the purposes of, I suppose, for completeness to this video, it would be good just to put in the association. It has its perks. I do feel one of the perks is the confidence interval. I do like the way it does that confidence interval. Sometimes dropping the rows and columns can be quite nice, the way you can do that so fast without having to do the select cases. Okay, so but look, there's pros and cons to doing this. Ultimately, how I would feel that if you where the custom tables is a place that you might want to look at for yourself is if you find that you end up generating tables in SPSS and you're regularly editing them in the same way. Okay, so you're regularly deleting certain rows and certain columns. Like if you feel that you're repeating the same process over and over again, then the custom tables could be the way forward then for you. Okay, look, and that sure brings to the end of this video. Hopefully you find it as a benefit. There's, I think, ultimately, when you do these things in various statistical packages, there's more than one way of doing the same thing. So you might feel that you have a different way of doing it that might be a bit more efficient to this. I'm all for that. If you have some other options, to maybe put something into the comments. Shared learning is an actually brilliant thing if we to actually do. So if you have any feedback on that, it'd be very much appreciated. If you've, I suppose, maybe ideas to other videos that you might like, something that might help you in your own research or your own work, again, you could use the comments, or you could reach out to me on one of these I suppose handles here. Okay, and I suppose last thing here then is, given that this is a YouTube video and everything like that, liking and sharing it is brilliant if you did feel that the content to this video is good. And also then would be subscribing to the channel is obviously a big benefit if it's if you felt that, I suppose, if you'd like updates on when the next videos are coming up and everything like that. Okay, but for the moment, hope you find this good of use. Thanks very much for your time. All the best.